Hello and welcome back. In today's tutorial, we'll be talking about power sources. So let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about power sources. Power sources come in many variations. They can run off anywhere as small as 3 volts up to 12 to 24. But there's a lot of pros and cons about using different style power sources. So what we prefer, and this is like your typical, here's your standard, very common case, 9-volt battery snap. We use this a lot when we want to use just a standard battery setup. What we really prefer to use is a AC/DC wall transformer, because this supplies a constant flow of power at a high amperage, and will run models and props that really have a lot more of feature and functions going on at the same time. They make a lot of different kinds of configurations as far as the actual hookups, but mainly we sell and we use a lot of these DC power jacks, which is a good solid connection and is able to plug directly into the actual transformer itself. So without getting into a lot of details about the differences, if you're looking for a battery operated system, you can look forward that it's only going to last between anywhere, depending on the play time and how long you turn it on. And we've done a lot of surveys on how long a battery will actually last on, let's say, 12 LEDs running consistently on with no features or functions, just on lighting only. And you can get up to 40 minutes of playtime before the battery really starts to fall out. If you're using it, it's a small battery application and you're displaying the model on a short-term basis, and that's usually most of the time the case, that you're going to be out there and you're going to be having showing off your model. You turn it on for a few minutes and then you turn it off, and it usually sits for quite a while just sitting there with it off. So in that case, batteries can last a long time. The one other give up when you're using using the battery system is a battery takes up some space and you need to make a spot to access the battery. So this kind of becomes a little bit of a configuration issue of, do you have the space to fit a battery in there, and how much access can you get to it without it looking too bad, where you hook up it into the actual model itself, if you're looking for a self-contained unit. A lot of times guys will go with, they'll have a battery system, but they'll run wires out of the model and run them, you'll have 2 main power feed lines, just a positive and a negative, and they'll run them through a tube or somewhere that they can get through to some kind of a base or a stand or a display stand. And then that way they'll house the battery system inside the base for easy access. That way you're not digging into the model. So those are kind of the pros and cons about using a battery system as far as that goes. As far as the fit goes and accessibility, it's got its pluses and it's got its minuses. So now let's talk a little bit about DC power. So the running off a wall transformer, you've got constant supply. There's never going to be any time where the battery's going to want to run out, or like from a typical battery system. It's always going to have that charge as long as it's plugged into the wall. It's going to be able to power it indefinitely. So like if we were setting up something for a museum display, or something that's going to be on inside somebody's man cave where they're going to have multiple models running, then we always opt out to go with, or opt in to go with these DC wall jacks or walls power supplies. So then that way there's no interruption, there's no fading of the system. It's constantly on. Once you plug it in, that's what you get all the way through. Now, the disadvantage is you obviously you have to be plugged into a wall source or some kind of a surge protector or something. And in the application for that, say like if you've got a nice big display room, you go in there, you set up a rack of these surge protectors and have them onto one wall switch or whatever, and you can have multiple transformers on there, and you can split them, so you can split them up and break them up. So in that way, when you turn it on, you could have a whole case light up with a lot of different models lit all at once. So this is kind of the advantage of using the transformer as opposed to using a battery system. And also, when you're asking for a lot of high demand, and say you've got over 12 lights running, maybe even you have some kind of integrated circuitry. It might be an Arduino board that you're running. It could be a driver board. It could be some kind of an array of LEDs or lights, but they draw a lot of current. So when they draw a lot of current, you tend to eat the battery alive really quick. So, the advantage of having that transformer is, again, you got direct current going to it. It's very powerful. It's consistent, and it really is the way to go as far as any kind of model. Most of the models that I do here for myself, I use the wall transformer system, just because I go with I don't want to switch batteries in and out. But I also have smaller display models that have a little 9-volt battery, and they only have a few lights. So if they have just a couple lights here and there, the battery system would probably work out just fine and be and work countless hours with no problem. But if you've got a bigger system and a bigger model, you're going to probably want to go with the wall transformer system. And to go into like a little bit of thing with voltages, I prefer voltage wise to run either 5 or 9 volts in your standard wall transformer, and they can be 1000 milliamps or better for the wall transformers. And then if I'm going to go down to a battery system, I prefer the 9-volt over anything, because if you go with a smaller, like a 6 or a 5-volt battery box, they're going to last a good amount of time because you got more cells running them. But anything 5 volts or better is really preferred, because again, if you're trying to run 3 volts or just a couple double A's, you can only run so much off just that one, the one battery. Now, everybody always asks this question, well, I want to run 12 volts. Okay, so you want to run a 12 volt system. I understand some applications do need the 12 volt system, and maybe it's an RC unit or something that has to have that higher draw that they need to run more power. So the advantage of once you go past 9 volts, you start to really get into, because you have the higher amperage, and 12 volts is very powerful, you tend to create more heat. So the give up is, once you go from a 9 volt system and you bump up to a 12 volt system, you will be producing more exchange of heat. So the system will run a little hotter. A lot of times I'll even suggest, if people are running 12 volt systems, to run a 1/2 watt resistor, something that can really handle a good load, and not get as hot and be able to dissipate the heat a lot better. The wiring stays pretty cool, even at 12 volts. But it's taken a lot of, the resistor's taken a lot of the heat from that 12 volt system. So again, that's kind of where if I'm going to a 12 volt system, I kind of will switch back and go with a 9 volt. As far as lighting power goes, 9 to 12, there is a difference. The 12 volts are a little bit brighter of a system. If you're really looking for really punchy light, really strong light, 12 volts can produce a lot of good light. A lot of the strip systems with lighting strip will only run on a 12 volt, but they finally have made a little bit better conversions over them now. So now you can actually run a strip on 9 volt and still get a lot of output. So, I mean, it works in kind of both ways. But anyway, I don't really want to go too much more into this whole thing about power sources, because I think I've explained it enough that, you know, there's an advantage and a disadvantage of running a wall transformer as opposed to a, you know, a battery system. And they both have their pluses and they both have their minuses. So anyway, so I think I'll end it at that. And if you've got any questions, please, you could shoot me an email. Again, you know, picking out your application is kind of really the key to this whole using the right power source for the right situation. So anyway, to the next video, thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon.